The rain was relentless, hammering the windshield in deafening sheets as we wound along the deserted mountain road outside Flagstaff, Arizona. The rhythmic swish of the wipers barely cut through the dark chaos. In the back seat, I pressed my forehead to the cold window, tracing shaky lines in the condensation with my finger. Anything to distract me from a gnawing sense of dread curling tighter in my chest. Dad. My voice barely rose above the storm. Where are we going? No answer. Only the white-knuckled grip of my father on the steering wheel, the cold profile of my mother staring rigidly ahead as lightning fractured the sky into brutal flashes. I shifted uncomfortably. My legs trembled weakly. My medication had worn off hours ago, and the tremors were starting, sharp spasms running from my spine to my fingertips. Mom, I whispered, leaning forward to catch her eye in the rearview mirror. I need my dose early. I am not feeling right. You'll be fine. Her voice was so flat, so mechanical, I recoiled instinctively. I stared at her, at the woman who used to braid my hair, kiss my scraped knees, sing lullabies when my muscles locked into cramps as a child. We turned onto a narrow dirt road, the tires sinking deep into mud. No streetlights, no houses, just endless rows of towering pines and darkness stretching like an ocean around us. Something inside me snapped awake. The air in the car wasn't just tense anymore, it was dangerous. The car jolted to a stop on the shoulder. Get out. My father's voice was sharp, cruel. I blinked at him, confused. W what? The rain came down harder now, cold bullets soaking through the cracked window seal. This isn't funny, I said nervously, thinking, hoping this was some twisted joke. It's pouring. I can't even walk without help. What are you talking about? My father turned off the engine. Slowly, methodically. Then he got out, slammed the door, and came around to mine. The door yanked open. Rain and wind attacked my skin. Get out. I stared up at him, stunned. Dad, please, whatever I did, I'll do better, I swear, I'll be good. His fingers clamped onto my thin arm, wrenching me out of the car like I weighed nothing at all. I stumbled, knees collapsing into thick, freezing mud. The tremors overtook me at once, violent, humiliating. You're a burden, Mara. His words sliced deeper than the cold. We've done everything. Doctors, specialists, money, years wasted. I looked at my mother, silently pleading. Her expression didn't change. She couldn't even meet my eyes. The insurance ran out. The donations dried up. You're killing us. The last word hung in the air like a sentence. My father shoved a backpack at me, a pathetic collection of essentials tossed into a cheap school bag. It splashed into a puddle beside me, soaking through immediately. I gasped through chattering teeth. You're leaving me here? Neither of them spoke. My father slammed the trunk, walked back around, and slid into the driver's seat. My mother followed. The taillights flared against the wall of rain, and then faded into the distance without so much as a goodbye. I lay motionless in the mud, shaking, drenched, unable to stand. The bitter realization sank into my bones along with the rainwater. They left me to die, alone, utterly alone. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes? Hours? The storm blurred time into something meaningless. I drifted in and out of consciousness as cold mud soaked through my thin jeans and sweater. Every spasm that racked my body felt like a final betrayal. I had always known I was sick, but I had never believed I was disposable. A pair of headlights appeared far in the distance. I forced my trembling arm upward, waving weakly, praying for a miracle. The vehicle slowed as it approached the crumpled shape of my body on the side of the road, then kept going. The wave of hopelessness that crashed over me was worse than the cold. I laid my head down, shivering violently, eyelids growing heavier. Maybe this was it. Maybe they had gotten what they wanted after all. Footsteps. I barely registered them over the relentless pounding of rain. Steady, heavy, purposeful, Panic jolted through my weakened frame. I had nothing left to fight with. The figure crouched beside me. A hand brushed the wet hair from my forehead, fingers rough but gentle. A voice cut through the storm, soft but urgent. Mara, Mara, stay with me. You're safe now. That voice. It couldn't be. I squinted through blurred vision, tried to speak, but the name barely slipped past my lips. Nathan. The man's face swam into focus. Older, leaner, rugged, but unmistakably him. My brother. The one who vanished when I was 8. I never forgot you, Bean. His old nickname for me made my chest constrict. I've been watching. I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't process any of it. My body betrayed me again, fading into blackness against the warmth of his chest as he carefully lifted me from the ground. The last thing I heard before unconsciousness swallowed me whole was his voice. You're safe, Mara. I've got you. The first sensation I felt was warmth. Blessed warmth. A soft blanket tucked under my chin, the comforting crackle of firewood burning. I opened my eyes to dim, flickering light dancing against rustic wooden walls. I was lying on a bed piled high with thick quilts, and 4-line trailed into my arm. Panic surged for a second. Where was I? The door creaked open, and Nathan stepped inside, carrying a mug that steamed in the cold air. He had changed into dry clothes, dark thermal shirt, worn jeans, work boots caked in mud. His brown hair, longer than I remembered, curled slightly at the nape of his neck. Stubble darkened his jawline, but it was the eyes. His eyes, the same intense, deep-set blue as mine. You're awake, he said gently, setting the mug on the small nightstand. Drink. Tea with honey. It'll help your throat. I stared at him, mouth dry, brain spinning wildly. How? My voice cracked painfully. You've been gone for years. Nathan helped me sit up with practiced ease, propping pillows behind my back. I never left you, Mara. I left them. I sipped the warm liquid. It steadied my shaking hands, just enough to focus. My mind flashed back to the night he disappeared. The screaming, the slammed door, the emptiness that had swallowed our house ever since. You stood up to Dad, I whispered. It wasn't a question. Nathan nodded slowly, jaw tightening at the memory. He refused to get you the care you needed. I tried to help. It escalated fast. He threw me out. My hands clenched the blanket. I had spent 9 years thinking my brother had abandoned me, when all along he had been banished for trying to save me. Tears burned behind my eyes. I looked everywhere for you, he continued, voice heavy with regret. They blocked my calls, returned my letters unopened. I even came to your school once, but they'd told the staff I wasn't allowed near you. The years of aching emptiness, of wondering why he had disappeared, cracked and splintered under the weight of the truth. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Not anymore. The days blurred into each other after that, marked by the rhythm of healing and the quiet safety of the place Nathan had built. I learned quickly that the cabin wasn't just shelter. It was a fortress hidden deep in the pine forest about an hour outside of Flagstaff. The outside looked like any ordinary weathered log home, but inside Nathan had wired it with solar panels, satellite internet routed through encrypted channels, emergency supplies, and even a backup generator hidden under what appeared to be a root cellar. I spent the first week in bed, barely able to move without trembling violently. Jade Monroe, Nathan's friend and a former military medic, visited every day from her small rural clinic 30 miles away. She was in her mid-30s, dark hair cropped short, brown eyes sharp but kind. Her no-nonsense attitude was exactly what I needed. Arms up, Jade instructed, guiding me through painful, simple movements. 10 seconds. You've already regained 5 degrees of mobility since Monday. That's progress. It didn't feel like progress. I groaned, sweat beading on my forehead. Doesn't feel like anything but agony. Jade gave me a rare smirk. Good. That means you're alive. Nathan entered carrying a basket of carrots and radishes, still dusted with earth. His clothes were streaked with dirt, and he smelled faintly of pine sap. How's the patient? Stubborn, Jade replied as she packed up her kit. Runs in the family. Nathan winked at me. You'll fit right in here then. When Jade left, Nathan helped me out onto the small porch. A soft breeze stirred the tall trees. From this vantage point, I could see the greenhouse, the small workshop, even a tiny stream winding lazily through the property. I leaned back against the chair, exhausted but strangely at peace. You did all this yourself? Nathan nodded. Mostly. I had help from a mentor I met in Denver. Old guy, Vietnam vet. Taught me how to live off-grid, how to build, how to disappear. You were hiding? I asked. Not hiding, just staying off their radar. It's harder for them to find you if you leave no digital footprint. I didn't ask who they were. Not yet. A cold pit had already settled in my stomach. I stared at the scar that ran across the knuckles of Nathan's right hand. A souvenir of the last fight with our father, I realized. That night, as the crackle of firewood filled the silence between us, I finally whispered the question that had haunted me for years. Why didn't you come back? Nathan exhaled slowly, staring into the flames. I tried, Mara. I tried so many times. I tracked hospital records. I checked missing persons databases. I joined online support groups for your condition under fake names, just in case you posted. They told the police and the schools I was dangerous, unfit, abusive. His hands clenched tightly around the metal cup. I couldn't risk them taking you away for good, so I waited and watched from a distance. The grief and betrayal roared up inside me like a wildfire. Years of suffering, of thinking I had been abandoned by everyone, when the truth had been twisted beyond recognition. I reached across the table and placed my trembling hand over his. You never gave up. Nathan's voice softened, thick with emotion. I never will. I closed my eyes as tears silently slid down my cheeks. For the first time in almost a decade, I allowed myself to believe something I had stopped daring to hope for. I wasn't alone anymore. The routine of safety didn't last. It never does. On the 4th week after Nathan found me, as autumn winds swept through the pine forest and the mornings grew colder, something shifted. Nathan became restless. He stopped working on the greenhouse, spent more time inside reviewing camera footage from the multiple hidden trail cams around the property. I noticed the dark circles under his eyes deepen. One evening, I woke to hushed voices. The faint glow from the computer room spilled into the dark hallway. I pulled myself up, using the cane Jade had brought for me, and moved toward the light. Nathan and Jade were standing over a monitor. I could barely hear Nathan's tight voice. They're getting too close. I cleared my throat. Both of them jumped. What's going on? I asked, heart beginning to race. Nathan sighed heavily and motioned me to sit. The screen showed grainy footage from earlier that day. A dark sedan had stopped near the edge of the property line. A tall figure in a black rain jacket walked cautiously toward the cabin, pausing, looking around, then slipping a white envelope under the door before retreating quickly back into the woods. The blood drained from my face. Who was that? Jade shook her head grimly. Not law enforcement. Not any neighbor. Whoever it was didn't want to be seen. Nathan handed me the envelope. My hands trembled as I slid the folded paper free. Just one line was typed in cold, sterile font. You were never meant to survive. Stop digging. I stared at it for a long time. The letters burned into my brain. My heart pounded violently in my chest, an icy wave of terror washing over me. Nathan reached out and took the letter, his expression darkening into something dangerous. They found us. I shook my head slowly. No, they found the cabin. They don't know what else we know, or who I've become. Nathan's mouth twitched slightly at the corners, the barest trace of a proud smile flickering behind the hard lines of tension. That's my sister. I stood shakily, gripping the cane harder than I needed to. I'm done running, Nathan. He watched me carefully. Are you sure? Once we push back, there's no pulling back into the shadows. I nodded, my voice clear despite the trembling of my limbs. They left me to die. They tried to erase me. They're going to wish they had finished the job because I won't stop now. Jade nodded approvingly. She's stronger than most soldiers I know. That night I couldn't sleep. Every branch scraping against the window sounded like a footstep. Every owl's cry twisted into the imagined whisper of someone outside. But as the fire crackled and the clock on the wall ticked on steadily, I stayed awake, determined not to let fear win. At dawn, Nathan found me still sitting at the table, staring at the white envelope. You're really not going to stop, are you? I smiled faintly, exhaustion heavy in my bones, but something new burning fiercely underneath. No, I want justice. Nathan's jaw tightened and he nodded slowly. Then we do it together. No more secrets. The letter lay between us, like a battle line. My past had tried to break me. My family had discarded me. The people behind Nexovian Therapeutics wanted me erased. I traced my fingers over the smooth paper and whispered to myself, not anymore. The next few days passed in a blur of determination and dread. Jade continued her visits, pushing me through painful physical therapy sessions. Nathan barely left his desk, surrounded by piles of bank statements, old insurance records, and documents he'd been quietly collecting for months. One chilly morning, as golden light filtered weakly through the curtains, I sat wrapped in a heavy quilt, flipping through my mother's old leather-bound journal, the one Nathan had found hidden in a rented storage unit under her maiden name. At first, the entries were mundane, recipes, grocery lists, reminders for doctor appointments. But as the pages darkened with time, the tone shifted. The handwriting became messier, more frantic. My breath caught as I reached a single damning entry dated shortly after my 3rd birthday. Robert signed the final paperwork today. $30,000 deposited immediately, with quarterly payments to follow. The doctor explained the protocols, said risks were minimal, that our daughter would be helping other children. I should have said no. God help me, I should have said no. My vision blurred. My stomach clenched violently. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth as nausea and horror rolled through me. They had sold me, not figuratively, not emotionally. My parents had literally signed a contract with Nexovian Therapeutics when I was 3 years old, enrolling me in some experimental medical trial in exchange for money. I wasn't just sick. I had been made sick. I bolted from the bed, dragging my weakened legs toward Nathan's work desk. I slapped the open journal onto the pile of documents. Read this. My voice cracked as rage and heartbreak warred inside me. Nathan froze, scanned the page, and visibly paled. His expression hardened into something cold, almost frightening. I found this name on some of the medical forms, too, he said, pulling up files on his laptop. Nexovian Therapeutics. It's a private pharmaceutical company. They specialize in early-stage neurological treatments, and they have a history of paying off families under non-disclosure agreements. My knees buckled. I collapsed into the chair as 1,000 fragmented memories hit me at once. The strange doctors, who never stayed long. The bitter-tasting vitamins I was forced to take as a child. The painful blood draws I was told were to help you grow, sweetheart. The steady, terrifying decline of my health from the time I was a toddler. I shook my head, refusing to believe what I already knew deep inside. They experimented on me like I was a lab animal. Nathan's eyes blazed with fury. According to the records I found, the payments stopped when you were 14, right around the time your symptoms became too severe to hide anymore. My hands clenched into fists so tight my nails dug painfully into my palms. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had used me, profited off me, and when the experiment failed and I became nothing but an expensive burden, they left me to die. Nathan reached across the desk, his hand warm over mine, his voice low but steady. This changes everything. This isn't just parental betrayal anymore. This is criminal. I stared at the fading Arizona sunlight filtering through the window, my heart racing. For the first time since waking up in Nathan's cabin, the heavy fog of grief and helplessness started to lift. I had been a pawn in their twisted game, but not anymore. My fingers tightened around the edge of the journal. We're going to burn their whole house of lies down, one page at a time. Nathan smiled grimly. Damn right we are. Outside, the forest stood silent and still, as if holding its breath for the reckoning to come. And it was coming. 2 days later, everything changed again. Nathan burst into the room just after dawn, breathless, clutching a worn manila folder. His voice was low but urgent. I found her. I blinked, confused and groggy. Who? Dr. Simone Laird, lead researcher on Nexovian's neurological protocols. Nathan dropped the folder on the table. She left the company under mysterious circumstances 3 years ago. Disappeared from the medical field completely. But she resurfaced last year, teaching biology at a small community college near Phoenix. My pulse quickened. You think she knows what they did to me? She was there, Nathan said grimly. If anyone can give us answers, it's her. Jade paced nervously as we prepared for the trip. I don't like this, she muttered. They already know where the cabin is. They could be watching. Nathan nodded tightly. I'll draw them off. You two take the back road south. I've already planned the routes and packed emergency supplies in the Jeep. If anything happens to me, don't say that. I cut him off sharply. My heart clenched at the thought. He smiled, faintly, resting a hand on my shoulder. I'm not going to let them stop us now, Mara. We're too close. The plan worked. Late that morning, Nathan left in the truck. We watched from the treeline as the same black SUV from the trail cameras pulled onto the road minutes later and followed him. Jade didn't wait. She helped me into her old tan Jeep, and we slipped away along the winding forest roads toward Phoenix. The hours crawled by, nerves raw with every passing car. We arrived at the meeting point just after sunset, a deserted picnic area deep inside a state park. The only sound was the wind rustling through the dry leaves and the distant chirping of cicadas. Dr. Simone Laird was nothing like I expected. I'd imagined a cold corporate scientist. Instead, she was a petite woman in her early 50s with tired hazel eyes and hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting. As Jade helped me slowly to the bench, Dr. Laird's expression softened with recognition. The tremors, the weakness, phase 3, she whispered under her breath. I stared at her. What do you mean? She exhaled shakily. You were part of the phase 3 trial. 27 children were enrolled. Within 5 years, 24 suffered catastrophic neurological damage. I couldn't breathe. What happened to the others? One relocated overseas. One died in a car crash. You're the last one, Mara. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Jade narrowed her eyes. Why were the trials allowed to continue? Dr. Laird looked away, shame written across her face. Pressure from investors. Timelines shortened. Safety protocols ignored. When I tried to intervene, I was forced out. They offered me money to stay silent. She shook her head bitterly. I walked away instead. She pulled a small flash drive from her coat pocket and slid it across the bench. Everything I could copy before I left. Trial records, internal memos, patient data. It won't heal you, but it might help you hold them accountable. I stared at the tiny device like it was a live grenade. Dr. Laird's phone buzzed suddenly. She paled. Without speaking, she showed us the message. Unknown car asking for you at your apartment. Claimed to be brother. No brother listed. Get out now. Dr. Laird shoved the flash drive into my hand and stood abruptly. You have to go. Now. Jade didn't waste a second. She helped me to my feet, half carrying me back to the Jeep. As we sped out of the park under cover of darkness, I stared at the precious piece of plastic in my hand, my heart racing with terror and hope. The truth was finally ours, and now they knew we had it. The drive back to Flagstaff felt endless. Every pair of headlights behind us sent a jolt of panic through my chest. Jade kept her eyes locked on the rearview mirror, knuckles white on the steering wheel. We're not being followed, she murmured finally. Not yet. I stared down at the flash drive, turning it over in my trembling fingers. It felt impossibly light for something that could bring down an empire. When we reached the cabin just before dawn, Nathan wasn't there. His truck was gone. No note, no sign of struggle, just silence. Panic clawed at my throat. I checked my emergency phone. The cheap prepaid one Nathan had insisted I keep hidden for this exact reason. One unread message blinked back at me from an unknown number. Arrested. False charges. Lawyer needed. Storage unit on Main Street. Key under third rock from north corner. Don't come. Not safe. I gasped aloud. Jade grabbed the phone from my shaking hand and read the text. Her jaw tightened. Damn it. They got to him. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. The storage unit. That's where the rest of the evidence must be. Jade nodded grimly. We can't risk waiting. If they planted someone at the cabin, they'll go for the unit next. Less than an hour later, we parked a block away from the downtown Flagstaff storage facility. It was early, barely past 6. The streets were still quiet. I stayed low in the passenger seat while Jade slipped across the parking lot and retrieved the small silver key from under the designated rock. We moved quickly down the row of units until we reached number 138. The key clicked in the lock. Inside was a plain metal filing cabinet bolted to the back wall. Jade yanked open the drawers as I kept watch nervously outside. The files were there, neatly organized in Nathan's meticulous handwriting. Bank withdrawals, insurance claims, copies of my medical history, even time-stamped photos of my parents driving away the night they abandoned me. At the bottom of the last drawer was a thick legal envelope with my name scrawled across it. I opened it slowly, handshaking. Inside were legal documents, a fully completed emancipation filing, an emergency petition for guardianship transfer, notarized witness statements, everything I would need to declare legal independence for my parents and press charges. Nathan had planned for this. Tears pricked my eyes as relief and guilt washed over me. He had known how far they would go. He had prepared for the worst, and it had come true. We returned to the Jeep, and Jade immediately called a contact of hers, a civil rights attorney in Phoenix who had worked with whistleblowers before. Within minutes, we had a plan. That night, back at the cabin, I sat at the wooden table under the soft yellow glow of a single lamp. My mother's journal lay open beside me. The threatening note from the stranger at the cabin rested next to the flash drive. I stared at both as Jade made tea in the small kitchen. So many pieces had fallen into place. I was no longer the helpless girl they had discarded. I was something far more dangerous now. A girl with proof. The fear still hovered at the edges of my mind. I had no idea what they would do next. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done hiding. They wanted me erased. I whispered into the silence. But I'm still here. Jade came to stand beside me, resting a firm hand on my shoulder. They made a mistake, Mara. I glanced up at her. What mistake? They underestimated what happens when survivors fight back. The steps of the Coconino County Courthouse loomed ahead like the walls of a fortress. My cane tapped sharply against the stone as Jade guided me up, step by agonizing step. The sun blazed high above Flagstaff's crisp morning air, but I barely felt its warmth. My heart pounded louder than the reporter's questions echoing across the plaza. Are you the missing girl? Is it true you're suing your own parents? Did Nexovian experiment on you as a child? I stared straight ahead, refusing to flinch. Jade walked firmly beside me, shielding me from the barrage. We had deliberately chosen to go public today, to ensure there would be too many eyes for them to make me disappear quietly. Nathan's lawyer had called it insurance. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Reporters filled every seat, their pens scratching furiously over notepads. Across the aisle sat my parents, stony-faced and cold, pretending they didn't know the daughter they had once dragged to doctor after doctor, then left like trash on a wet roadside. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness, called the room to order. My attorney began to speak. I'd barely heard him as he laid out the allegations: medical exploitation, parental neglect, insurance fraud, child endangerment. The words barely registered. I was too focused on what I held tightly in my lap. When it was my turn, I rose slowly from my chair, gripping the cane tightly. My legs wobbled, but held. I stood unassisted for the first time in months. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My name is Mara Whitfield, I said, voice cracking slightly before strengthening. 3 weeks ago, my parents abandoned me on a remote road outside Flagstaff, leaving me to die because of my chronic illness. I locked eyes with my mother across the room. For once, she looked away. What the world did not know, I continued, was that my illness wasn't natural. It was the result of unauthorized experimental treatments I received as a child, without genuine informed consent, under a contract signed by my parents and Nexovian Therapeutics. I reached down and lifted the document Nathan had so carefully preserved. I held it high for the judge and cameras to see. This is the original agreement. They received over $400,000 over the course of my childhood in exchange for turning me into a human test subject. The courtroom erupted into shocked murmurs. The judge banged her gavel repeatedly for order. I stood my ground. 27 children were enrolled in Nexovian's Phase 3 trials. 24 suffered catastrophic side effects. I am one of only 3 to survive into adulthood. The others cannot speak for themselves, but I can. I handed over the flash drive Dr. Laird had given me. This contains internal emails, research data, and suppressed clinical findings, showing Nexovian knowingly ignored safety warnings in favor of profits. The judge glanced at the bailiff, who took it carefully. Silence fell heavy in the room. My voice softened but carried. I am not here for revenge. I am here for justice for myself and for every child whose life was stolen. As I turned to return to my seat, pain seared through my legs. I gritted my teeth and kept walking, step by defiant step, back to the table. Cameras clicked wildly. The courtroom held its collective breath. Outside, social media exploded. #JusticeForMara trended worldwide within hours. Victims from other families stepped forward with eerily similar stories. Nexovian's stock plummeted. 2 days later, Nathan walked free. The bogus charges evaporated under the weight of public outrage and media scrutiny. As we exited the courthouse together, reporters flooded toward us. Nathan wrapped a protective arm around my shoulders, steering me past the chaos. "You did it," he whispered into my hair. "You broke the wall they built around you." I leaned into him, exhausted but alive. For the first time in my life, I felt something deeper than survival. Victory. A year later, I stood at the edge of a wide clearing surrounded by towering pines, watching workers install the final piece of the hand-carved sign, the Mara Whitfield Medical Justice Center. I traced my fingers over the smooth letters as they fixed it into place. The property had changed so much since that first cold night Nathan had carried me here. The simple survival cabin had expanded into a refuge. A greenhouse, walking paths for therapy, counseling offices, even small cottages for victims of medical exploitation who had nowhere else to go. We had started with nothing, only evidence, outrage, and sheer determination. But the moment I stood in that courtroom, we unlocked something more powerful: belief. Donations had poured in from around the world. Survivors had rallied. Lawyers, doctors, volunteers had offered their help. Nexovian didn't survive. The company folded under the weight of lawsuits, federal investigations, and criminal charges. The executives who had once viewed me as just data points and dollar signs now faced prison sentences. As for my parents, they lost everything: their home, their retirement accounts, their public reputations. My mother's cold, carefully crafted facade had finally crumbled. Last I heard, she had left Arizona altogether under a cloud of disgrace. I leaned on my cane and smiled faintly at the irony. They had called me a burden. Now the center bore my name. "Looks good," Nathan's voice broke through my thoughts. I turned to see him walking toward me. At 29, the lines of stress that had once marked his face had softened. His broad frame and easy stride spoke of the hard work he'd thrown himself into. "You did this," he said simply. "We did this," I corrected. I still needed the cane on long days, but I could walk most mornings without it now. A miracle none of my former doctors had believed possible. Inside the main house, which doubled as our administrative center and home, Jade was reviewing paperwork. She had left her small clinic to run our trauma recovery program. Her experience as a combat medic had made her uniquely suited to help people heal, not just physically, but emotionally. Later that afternoon, Jade called out from the porch, holding a thin envelope. "Mara, a letter for you." The return address made my stomach twist. County Hospice Center. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible. "Mara, the doctors say I have weeks left. Lung cancer. I know you won't forgive me. I don't deserve it. But before I go, I needed you to know you were always the strongest person I've ever known. What we did was unforgivable. Your father called it survival. It was greed. Plain and simple. The woman you've become, the one standing up and helping others, that was never us. That was you. Always you." Ellen Whitfield. I folded the paper back into its envelope, stunned by the emptiness I felt. No anger, no sadness, just acceptance that some bridges should stay burned. That night, as the sun bled into the sky in soft streaks of gold and purple, I asked Nathan the question I had avoided for months. We sat together on the wide front porch, watching the fireflies flicker against the trees. "How did you know they were going to leave me that night?" He stared into the distance before answering softly. "I'd been tracking them for weeks. Their purchases, the way they drained your medical fund slowly, trying not to raise red flags. The sudden sale of the house. I knew they were planning something. I just didn't know what." "You could have called the police," I whispered. He shook his head. "And tell them what? That I had a feeling? No. I needed to catch them in the act. I followed the car. When I saw them drag you out and drive off, I nearly rammed their car off the road. But then I saw you collapsed in that ditch, and all that mattered was getting you safe." I blinked back unexpected tears. "Why, Nathan? After everything? Why risk everything for me?" His reply was quiet, unshakable. "Because you were never a burden to me." The words settled deep into my heart, filling the space that betrayal had once hollowed out. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was home. The following day, I stood at the podium of the small town hall where the city council had invited me to speak. The same city where a year earlier I had crawled through cold mud, thinking my life was over. Now I stood tall, still thin, still unsteady, but standing. The room was packed. Survivors, advocates, volunteers, and strangers who had followed our story and showed up just to say, "You gave me hope." Nathan and Jade stood at the back of the room. I drew strength from their presence. I took a breath and began, my voice steady. A year ago, I was left to die by the people who should have protected me. They viewed me as a burden, something to be discarded. They broke every vow of family, compassion, and decency. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. But I survived. And in losing the family I thought I had, I found my true home. In facing betrayal, I found a strength I never knew existed. In fighting for others, I found purpose. I looked directly at a young girl sitting in the front row, wearing leg braces, her mother's arm wrapped tightly around her shoulders. And to anyone who has ever been told they are worthless, inconvenient, or too broken to matter, I'm here to tell you that they were wrong. You matter. Your life matters. Your voice matters. I glanced toward Nathan, who gave me the smallest of nods. When they left me, they thought they ended my story. Instead, they lit the fire that turned me into the person standing here today. The crowd erupted into applause, some people rising to their feet, others dabbing at tears. I stepped down slowly, heart racing, but light for the first time in years. That evening, I walked alone to the far edge of the property. The full moon floated above the trees, casting silver light across the sanctuary that had saved me. My legs shook with fatigue, but I refused the wheelchair waiting at the porch. I wanted these few precious steps to be mine. I gazed up at the vast canvas of stars. I felt small, yes, but also infinite. A single life among billions, yet a life that now held purpose far beyond merely surviving. Footsteps crunched softly behind me. Nathan approached, his coat draped over his arm, concern flickering in his eyes. "You okay?" he asked gently. "It's getting cold." I smiled faintly, tears prickling behind my lashes. "I'm more than okay. I'm home." We stood together under the moon, two survivors of different storms who had found refuge in each other. The path ahead would never be easy. My condition would always be with me. The fight for justice would continue, sometimes painfully, sometimes slowly. But for the first time, I faced the future not with fear, but with fierce, unshakable hope. I turned back toward the cabin, toward the center that bore my name. As I walked forward, step by trembling step, I whispered the words that had carried me from that muddy roadside to this moment. They left me to die, but I lived. I lived